South Africa in the 1990s was a changing nation. The education landscape was changing too. So three men decided to open Trinity House, a Christian, co-educational private school. This is their story.
Because I kept watching the political agenda of the country.
And we knew that there was going to be problems as far as we are concerned, because SARTU didn't like superintendents or inspectors as they were called.
All of us realized that we would not be welcome in the new education department.
And that obviously I didn't want to be caught with nothing, with no options.
All of us were planning something or other.
At that stage I was turning 50, and so I was well aware that that age was against me to become a principal of some school. And so I spent a fair amount of time mulling in my mind through, was I still able to? I raised that with my Bible study, with some of my Bible study friends. And I shared my concerns as to what was about to overtake me and what I'd be doing. And they, on a good day, sat me down and they spoke, maybe the word is courage, but they spoke confidence into me. And from that point on, I started thinking, right, I want to start a school.
One day I was visiting the head office of the TED, which was winding down steadily. And I went to see Herbie Staples just to talk English to somebody, as the TED was a very Afrikaans organization. And the talk obviously got around to, what are you going to do when we no longer are wanted in the education system? And he said, you know, you and I should start a Christian private school. The only private school that wasn't run by a church was Crawford College, and Herbie had the figures for Crawford College, and he showed me that they made a healthy profit. I immediately declined, because my mother always used to say, only a fool risks his pension. And we prayed about it as a family. About 2 weeks after my meeting with Herbie in head office, he walked into my office in Alberton and produced a handwritten page of figures which were a sort of business plan for the private school. And we looked at it and he said, you've got to really think of this. And then I looked at the plan a little more closely and I saw that he didn't have a figure for a building and a premise. And I said, we need to find some sort of premises, either to rent or to build. And he undertook to look in the area where he lived, which was Randpark Ridge, because he said there were no private schools in the area, and the people in that area probably could afford private education. So he went off to look. And I looked at the cost of building. We just built the school, the TED had just built the school. So I knew exactly what a building cost. He had to find the land, and then we could draw up a better business plan. We looked at houses, big houses on big properties in the area. And we saw some that would handle one class per grade, high school only, because that's what we thought we would do. We were both high school principals. But we realized that the profit on one class per grade is too small. And Herbie then undertook to look for land. And he eventually found an agent that had Evan Walker on his books.
And I contacted a high-powered estate agent named John Webb. He, in due course, directed me to the property that was to become Trinity Randpark.
Evan owned a small holding that had been a caravan park years before and was a plant nursery at the time. It was still registered as agricultural land, right in the middle of built-up Randburg suburbs. It was almost as if God was keeping that piece of land just for us.
Now that was the first the major strategic breakthrough in my take on the history of the school. On 16 acres, we felt, both Ron and I, as we discussed it with each other, we felt we could make a school happen on 16 acres.
But we couldn't afford to buy it all at once, and Evan Walker, the owner, surprised us by saying, draw lines wherever you like, buy whatever piece you want, but the price goes up by 10% per year, and this is the price. No reason why a businessman should do that, but it worked for us.
So our first intention was to run a college. That intention didn't last long, because when we started marketing, it soon became apparent that the bigger demand was preparatory school.
By the time we got the architect involved, we were looking at 4 classes per grade, high school only. And then Herbie called a meeting of friends from his church, and we put the idea to them. About 20 people were there. And to our utter surprise, they all wanted us to have a primary school as well as a high school.
And that caused us to consider the notion, and we didn't even take long. It was almost self-explanatory to us. We said, no, it's clear that we've got to open a primary school.
So we called the architect and told him to adjust the building to accommodate 4 classes per grade from grade 1 to grade 12.
We can open a prep school, and if the demand is there, we could open the first 2 grades of a secondary school and then grow the secondary school out from there. That's precisely what happened.
You needed money to buy the land and to build the school, and no bank would lend you 100%, so you had to have some money. We, the 2 of us, didn't have enough to even buy the land, so we started looking for other investors, and Tony McKee was the first person we approached, and he jumped at the idea straight away.
I came on board right at the very beginning. I was the only one who was brave enough to actually take this leap of faith. Many of my colleagues were approached, and all of them turned it down.
A couple of them showed limited interest. Most shied away immediately because they were frightened of losing their pensions.
I just felt in my heart that this is what the Lord wanted me to do.
Ron was the contact person to get us busy with Horst Roschka. The rest of us didn't know better, and we trusted Ron, and so Ron's judgment became our judgment.
Horst Roschka built the school for Meadow Primary on behalf of the TED, and I'd seen his innovative design. It was different to anything the TED had. So I approached him in 1994 and asked for a concept, and he drew a plan on an A4 size and showed us at a meeting in the old TED head office. He was so nervous he drank an entire jug full of water as he explained what his plan looked like.
Horst Roschka added a different flavor.
It was unique in that it had this grid system, passages enclosed. You could walk anywhere in the building without going outside. It was smooth. There were no steps anywhere excepting in front of the hall, but you could get there via another route in a wheelchair. It was a unique design.
When I saw the original plans, I was terribly excited because here were classrooms that were built with a garden outside and windows that could look out onto the garden without obstruction. And what appealed to me was the fact that we could add a number of classrooms as the need arose. We didn't anticipate the growth that we got at Trinity. And so the original design was, to me, phenomenal.
We had to subdivide the land in order to buy the piece we could afford, and that needed to be done by an expert. And we needed the architect to fit the building we wanted onto that piece of land. And that all took place in 1996. Eventually we went to tender, and the tenders closed on the end of July. And the builder said, if you don't let me start on the 1st of August, I won't finish the building by the time you want to occupy it in January. So we took a huge risk and we told him to go ahead. And then we started negotiating with the banks.
If you now want to buy a 16-acre property, where do you get the money from? We approached a variety of mainstream banks.
2 banks had guaranteed that they would support us in earlier negotiations. And the day after we opened the tenders, I took plans and business plan to the 2 banks, and a month went by. The builder was working. He submitted his first draw, 500,000 rand. And I phoned the banks and said, what's going to happen? I said, no, we're working on it.
We didn't know at the time that we were talking to middle management, and middle management didn't make the big decisions on money.
And a couple of days later, they both phoned on the same day and said, oops, our head office says we don't do schools.
How did you feel when they phoned you?
Gutted. We owed the builder money, we owed the owner of the land money, and we didn't have enough to pay either of them everything that we needed. So it was very important to find a bank that would support us.
It meant a lot. We had to fork out everything. All the money that I got from the pension gratuity went into this. So if it didn't work, we would have been left with absolutely nothing.
They were scared of funding elderly people who wished to start a business venture that they had no track record of. And they knew that if the venture failed, they couldn't just foreclose on a school. It would lead to reputational damage for the bank. And so one by one, all the big banks collapsed on us.
After we'd been rejected by the 2 banks that had promised to help us, I took business plans and building plans to every bank that I could think of in Johannesburg. Some of them received me quite well, others rejected me at the counter and didn't even listen to my story. Very depressing.
That led us to the next breakthrough element in the history of the school.
It was a God incident because the 2 other banks had turned us down, and the one chap felt so guilty about it. He said, I've got a friend in BOE, and consider them for your loan, which we did.
I phoned him. He said, how long before you can get to the site? I said, I'm in Alberton, take me 40 minutes. See you there, he said. When I got to the site, which was now up to roof height already, he was sitting in a 2-door city golf, and I thought, oh, crikey, they've sent an office boy to talk to me. He never got out of the car. I climbed in with a set of plans and business plan, and he read superficially the plans, and then he drove around the site and said, okay, I'll give you an answer exactly in a week's time. And off he drove. And I thought, yeah.
Unbeknown to us, they had probed Mark Henning, who at that stage was the chairperson and the CEO of the ISASA Schools group, a very influential man with incredible networking skills. And he gave us as people a very good reference with the bank.
And he asked Mark Henning, can these three guys from the TED make a go of a private school? And Mark Henning's answer was, well, if those three can't, there's no one in South Africa who can. And exactly a week later, he phoned me and said, you've got your money.
That was a breakthrough element. That was...
But the Lord wasn't finished with us. When we had public meetings, which we had once a month, He sent people waving their checkbooks at us to book places in future years. To our surprise, we had very few booking for the following year, for 1997. I suppose they wanted to see building first. And this waving of the checkbooks brought us more than 2 million rand in a couple of months, which we paid into a trust account with the auditors. And when we needed to pay the builder and the bank's money hadn't come through because subdivision hadn't come through, we could pay the builder. And in fact, we paid the owner of the land with money that we got from deposits. There was a rumor that Horst had designed the school to be a clinic if it failed as a school, but the reality is the board of BOE asked the man who was the consultant what would they use the building for if the school failed, and he came up with the idea that it could be a clinic because you could reach any room in a wheelchair.
But going back to the design that Horst had, the thing that impressed me most was when he came with the plans of the hall. That really excited me because that was something I'd never seen anywhere before. And to have the hall with the executive offices all combined was something I'd never seen before. And the size of the stage was much bigger than any other TED hall stage that we'd seen before. So it was very, very appealing.
All of us were overtly and unashamedly Christian. So we had agreed as a board that we would want to start a holistic education school of excellence. We had agreed as a board that our school should have an overt Christian ethos.
We decided that children had to attend the assemblies.
This is what we expect. It's a Christian school. We're going to have Bible ed. We expect your pupils your children to attend.
We felt that as a Christian school, we should not limit anyone and refuse anyone. So we decided that unlike the church schools in the area, we wouldn't have exams that the children had to write in order to be admitted. So we took them on a first-come, first-served basis. And the ones for future years, we took deposits, promising them a place when their year came. We had a long waiting list at grade 1 and grade 8 level.
We realized that we couldn't get a lot of equity capital going between the three of us. So that led us to the logical conclusion we needed other shareholders. We also, at that stage, lacked a little bit of confidence in our business abilities. And that made us feel safer, the fact that we would cut in some additional people who could contribute to funding. Out of that realization came the addition to us of Miles Wilson, who was a qualified chartered accountant, and his skills were very valuable to our school. Louis Baeta, a seasoned businessman with significant business skills and entrepreneurial skills. And Colin Thompson, a very well-respected headmaster who had been the headmaster of a number of schools in the Cape as well as Gauteng.
Herbie Warren came in somewhere after March in 1996, and he was my brother-in-law, an electrical engineer who had a doctorate in commerce, and he drew up a very professional business plan, which we used as we expanded the building. We just adapted the numbers each time. So he did a good job for us and then withdrew. So we ended with 6 partners altogether. Herbie was the principal of the primary school, or the preparatory school as he liked to call it. I was the principal of the high school, and I was the chairman of the board.
And we had the wise words of Colin, a man of great wisdom. And he was the peacemaker every time that there were ructions in the board meeting. And he would calm things down. And he had wonderful wisdom. And he always listened to Colin.
Colin initially wasn't a teacher on the staff. He remained as principal of Damelin. Tony came in as a deputy principal, science teacher. The people started registering for the following year, the year that we would open, 1997. And we in fact opened with 298 pupils. And within a couple of days, it went to 330, which was an immense number for a school to start with. We had lots of people booking for future years. And we had mothers coming in saying, I'm pregnant, I want to book my child, whatever it is, in 7 years from now. Kept us going. All the years we owned the business, we had long waiting lists. We had the pick of the best teachers because they were fleeing the GDE system. So we could pick and choose, and we got extremely strong teachers as well as good pupils. All the years that I was at the school, and that was 14 years, there was major building every year somewhere on the premises. Either pre-primary schools, or fields to be made, or roads to be built, or tennis courts to be made, and kept us going. We progressed from being a very small school, high school with only 40 odd pupils the first year, to a school of about 500 by the time I left.
As we got older, we were beginning to worry about succession planning because we were getting close to retirement age. We didn't know what was going to happen in the future. So it was a big question about what we would do.
We also had a buy-sell agreement so that if one of the 6 owners decided they wanted to be out, we'd have a price that they could pay, and we got the auditors to value the company, and they valued it at about 40 million. And then one evening at a board meeting, Tony mentioned right at the end of the meeting that he'd been approached by an Alex Isakidis from Agritech, who had suggested that they would be prepared to pay 90 million for the school. On considering the valuation that the auditors had just made,
To use the language of my sons, they're smoking their socks.
and we decided to ignore them. We didn't even bother to go back to them.
And Alex phoned me and said, can we have coffee together? And I said to the board, I'm going to have coffee with Alex Isakidis. anything I should say or anything I shouldn't say. And they said, just go and listen. And I went, and we chatted for quite some time and had coffee together. And he was quite open about the fact that he was saying, well, Advotech are interested in buying. So I said to him, the one thing that will be a stumbling block for us selling to you is that the ethos of the school is Christian. If you're not prepared to accept that the ethos of the school is Christian, then you can stop right here, because the board will say no. And he explained that all their schools had their own identity and their own ethos, and the Christian ethos at Trinity would remain. So I said, well then, we talk some more.
A month later, they approached Tony again and said, how does 100 million sound?
When I brought this to the board, they immediately took out their calculators and they sharpened their pencils.
I think I can speak for Louis Baeta and for Miles Wilson. So the three of us did not feel that was fair value for Trinity.
But there are business people that we had on board, and they said, negotiations are always negotiations. So we don't accept the first offer, we negotiate. And so the negotiations started taking place.
And then several meetings later, we got the final figure out of them, 103.5 million rand.
And we all agreed to sell at that level.
Vivi was the one who stuck his heels in the most. And I must hand it to him that we got as much as we did for the school.
The rest is history.
In 2008, Trinityhouse Randpark Ridge included 7 full-size sports fields, 8 all-weather tennis courts, and a half-size Olympic pool. There were about 100 classrooms, 2 air-conditioned halls, and the school employed about 100 teaching staff and another 50 admin and general assistants. There were close to 1,850 pupils attending when the business was sold. Advotech was true to their word and not only kept the Christian ethos, but also expanded the brand to include schools in Little Falls, Heritage Hill, Glen Vista, they continued to invest in Trinityhouse Randpark Ridge by building a second pool, revamping the admin block, and building the much-needed AstroTurf on the St. George's Field. Trinity House has been blessing families for 25 years. We were truly blessed to be a part of it.
Ron was the engine, Herbie was the visionary. He had all the ideas, but Ron put them together. And that's how we worked as a team.
We were blessed enormously by the Lord in the way He provided pupils and teachers. We made a profit every year, even the first year, which is unheard of. And even in the year when the interest rates went to 24%, we still made a profit that year.
People exercised faith in us, and we, with hindsight, we realized that that was the hand of the Lord helping us.